Okay, now that we have a page, we have a reasonable container that we can practice some code in. So to begin with, let's use the dependency injection container to access a service of some kind. Let's jump to the resource pack directory, and we'll open up the 13th step, which is blinddatecontroller.php using a service call. And let's compare this with our existing blind date controller. I'm just going to copy this and do a file comparison. Okay, so this is our old file, this is our new one. Now, instead of just returning some basic markup, what we're doing is using Drupal current user here to grab an account, and then we're grabbing the username of that account. Now, even though this doesn't look like it's a call to service, like we're doing down here, if we looked at the signature for this function, I'm going to go ahead and do a command click on it to pop it up. You can see that we're right now inside of the Drupal class, and we're in the current user function here. And what it does is return the container get and then current user. So even though current user doesn't look like it's a service, it ties right back into the dependency injection container, in particular into the current user service. So we could use the syntax. Let me just pop back to our comparison here. We could use Drupal ::service, and then in here we could put current_user, and that would be the same as this. Now in Drupal 7, in order to get information about the currently logged in user, we would use a global variable called user. Somewhere near the top of our function, we would define it as global, so we'd say global and then user, the variable, and then we could access properties from that user and even change properties in that user inside of our function. Now that was problematic because it was easy to, for example, change the value of that user variable without intending to, and the existence of a global variable in general can cause problems for reasons we discussed earlier. So instead of that global user variable, now what we do is use the current user service. And instead of accessing properties of that user account, we instead use getter methods. We talked a bit about this in the object-oriented section of this series, but the idea with a getter method is that it wraps around a property so it becomes easier to test and easier to adjust later in a consistent way. If we're accessing properties directly, we kind of take control away from the class and we might get something unexpected at some point down the road. So instead of what we'd see in Drupal 7, which would be account and then name, we're instead saying get username, which is a method that wraps around that property. So this is a service that we're using, even though it doesn't necessarily look like we're using a service directly. We are. And then we're going to use another service here. We're going to use the service called UUID. Now, I found this just by going through the list of services in the dependency injection container and just trying to find something that looked approachable, something that seemed clear about how you would use it. And when I took a look at the UUID class, it had this generate function that would generate a unique identifier. And that's what we're producing here.